In Dalton, Illinois, political tension isn't uncommon, but under Mayor Tiffany Henyard, it's erupted into a full-blown political spectacle. Famous for her fiery exchanges and relentless clashes with board members, Henyard has always been a polarizing figure. But the most recent village board meeting didn't just ignite controversy, it detonated a long-brewing crisis. What was meant to be a standard government session spiraled into a scene straight out of a political thriller, leaving even her harshest critics stunned. Originally scheduled for Village Hall, the meeting had to be relocated to the local park district after an overwhelming crowd of anxious residents showed up. But these folks weren't there for routine governance. They came expecting fireworks, and they got them. After months of tension, fierce disputes over appointments, heated budget battles, and whisperings of misconduct, the pressure finally boiled over. From the moment Henyard grabbed the mic, it was obvious she wasn't in the mood to play nice. Her tone was firm, her presence commanding, but not in a collaborative way. Rather than addressing the village's growing concerns, she commandeered the stage, transforming the meeting into her personal platform. The live stream had to be abruptly cut. Onlookers watched in disbelief as order crumbled. This wasn't governance. It was pure drama. And Dalton's residents could feel every moment of it. Then came a twist no one saw coming. In what looked like a bold power play, Henyard abruptly declared her own official meeting back at Village Hall. Only 2 trustees followed, nowhere near enough for a legal quorum. When it fizzled, Henyard didn't back down. She stormed out, jumped into her vehicle, and rushed back to the park district where the actual meeting had continued without her. What happened next became the defining image of the night. Henyard burst back into the room and declared boldly, "I am the mayor of the village of Dalton." But there was no applause, just chilling silence. Some in the crowd literally turned their backs. The atmosphere flipped. What was meant to assert authority instead unveiled vulnerability. In that split second, Henyard didn't appear powerful. She looked like a leader losing control of the narrative. What began as a behind-the-scenes feud between mayor and trustees had now spilled out into the streets. The audience's patience wore thin. Many who had once backed Henyard now saw a version of her gripped by power, not progress. And the chaos was no longer confined to politics. It had become personal. It had become public. And it wasn't slowing down. Then the courts stepped in. A judge issued a temporary restraining order, blocking Henyard from making crucial appointments without board approval. Her power was officially limited, but instead of recalibrating, Henyard doubled down. The less control she had, the more aggressive her approach became. Civil discourse vanished, communication broke down. Dalton had turned into a community in conflict with itself, a mayor locked in battle with her own administration, trustees struggling to hold the line, and a town left wondering if it could ever find peace again. What was once heralded as strong leadership had morphed into a cautionary tale, less about strength, more about instability. With every fiery monologue, every power move, Tiffany Henyard's image morphed, no longer the symbol of progress. Now she was the storm. The clash between Henyard and her board was no longer private. It had gone completely public. As she faced the crowd again, trying to regain control, the room didn't cheer. It froze. No applause, no approval, just cold rejection. The optimism that once followed her rise had faded. And in its place, disappointment. Henyard hadn't just fractured her board, she fractured Dalton's faith in its own leadership. What should have been a routine board meeting spiraled into yet another disastrous chapter in Dalton's unraveling. Mayor Tiffany Henyard's obsession with control and her refusal to respect protocol turned what was meant to be civic discourse into absolute chaos. Her very presence no longer brought order, it lit a match. And for the first time, people were beginning to ask the unthinkable. Could their town even survive her leadership? Week after week, the spectacle eclipsed any sense of progress. Henyard's once commanding catchphrase, "I am the mayor of the village of Dalton," had turned into a running joke, a viral meme shared with disbelief. That night, tensions hit their peak. She tried to force the appointment of a new police chief right then and there, sparking immediate outrage. As the crowd erupted, Henyard made one last desperate move, declaring the entire meeting invalid. But no one was falling for it. The room exploded, voices clashed, and chaos took over. Just 7 minutes in, Henyard stormed out. Boos echoed behind her as she left. But then came the moment that changed everything. Police stepped in to calm the escalating situation outside. Whispers spread. There might have been a confrontation between Henyard and another official. Murmurs turned to gasps. And then, it happened. Tiffany Henyard was placed under arrest, right there in front of the town she once vowed to uplift. The same woman once seen as a symbol of reform now stood in cuffs, surrounded by flashing lights and shocked residents. The evening had started with a glimmer of unity, but ended in scandal, humiliation, and disbelief. The damage had been done. Her arrest wasn't just the abrupt end of a meeting, it was the climax of months of dysfunction. Power struggles, distrust, and backdoor dealings had all led to this very moment. Dalton wasn't merely divided, it was broken. What began as a hopeful new chapter had turned into a story no one could spin. And now, the question was no longer if she could lead, it was how the town would recover at all. Henyard's arrest didn't just end the night's drama, it ended an era. The woman once praised as a bold disruptor had become the face of disarray. As she was escorted away in handcuffs, longtime residents stood silent. The hope they once had in her vision now felt foolish. What began as passionate leadership had disintegrated into crisis, dragging a quiet Illinois village into national headlines. Her fall wasn't sudden. It was a slow, very public descent. That moment, her arrest, became Dalton's turning point. Years of dysfunction had replaced progress with political theater. But this time, it was different. This wasn't just another meeting meltdown. It was a full fracture. She had burst into the session attempting to force appointments, including installing a new police chief. But her grip on power was already gone. The people weren't listening. Her voice, once commanding, was drowned by a community tired of being ignored. Her final move collapsed in plain sight, and the response from the crowd was swift and brutal. No applause, no loyalty, just fury and frustration. And then came the defining image. Mayor Henyard, flanked by officers, marched out in front of the very residence she was elected to serve. Her administration didn't close with dignity. It ended in handcuffs. And what followed wasn't just shock, it was collective grief over what Dalton could have been. From day one, Henyard governed with confrontation. She steamrolled trustees, skipped procedures, and made key decisions without counsel, especially when it came to law enforcement. To many, this wasn't leadership, it was a breach of trust. Dalton gave her the keys, and she used them to break down the rules, not build the future. Even when courts tried to intervene, she doubled down, painting herself as a martyr battling corruption. But the people had heard enough. The lawsuits, the reckless spending, the power grabs, it all finally collapsed. That night, the illusion shattered. She wasn't voted out. She was removed by force. Her fall, though dramatic, was no surprise. What began as a campaign of hope ended as a cautionary tale. Henyard had alienated allies, ignored the law, and betrayed the trust of the very people who once cheered her name. Now Dalton stands among the debris of her tenure, unsure how, or if, it can rebuild. Can Dalton bounce back? Can trust ever be restored? Those questions now haunt a town pushed to the brink, because this wasn't just a scandal, it was systemic failure. And even as the pressure built, Henyard clung to her role as the misunderstood hero. She turned to social media, casting herself as the only honest leader left, dismissing critics as liars and pawns in a smear campaign. But the more she embraced that storyline, the more out of touch she seemed. The deeper people dug, the worse the picture became. Reports surfaced of lavish travel, high-end hotels, and taxpayer dollars spent on personal indulgence. For a struggling town like Dalton, it felt like a slap in the face. Accusations of financial abuse and extravagant spending overtook any sympathy she had left. The facts were too loud to ignore. And so was the damage. Still, Henyard held her ground. She brushed off the mounting allegations as a coordinated smear campaign, insisting that her critics were part of a plot to destroy her name. But leaked records and eyewitness testimonies painted a very different picture. The financial missteps, whether by carelessness or calculated intent, were becoming too serious to ignore. Trust was unraveling. And with federal and state probes underway, including from the FBI, the pressure was closing in fast. Henyard's grip on power wasn't just loosening, it was crumbling. Yet even as scrutiny intensified, she doubled down on her self-styled image as the people's mayor. A small circle of loyal followers clung to her story, a woman of the people standing alone against a corrupt machine. They flooded social media with defenses, convinced this was all political theater. But even that echo chamber began to fracture. Then came the moment that shattered what little support remained. A brazen disruption at the Park District building. No quorum, no formal invitation, no reason for her to be there. But she barged in, loud, uninvited, and unyielding. The crowd's reaction was swift and explosive. Boos erupted, voices clashed, some even threw objects. But Henyard stood firm. She tried to bulldoze her way through the agenda, pushing through major appointments like a new police chief without any legal backing. Her outright dismissal of rules and decorum turned what should have been a routine civic meeting into a public disaster. Her unwillingness to collaborate or even acknowledge basic governance was now impossible to deny. To many residents, that was the breaking point. Whatever optimism had once surrounded Henyard had withered. What remained was anger, betrayal, and exhaustion. The foundations of Dalton's local government were buckling under the weight of her leadership. That chaotic night didn't just reflect dysfunction. It confirmed it. The government had become unworkable under her command. Whatever legitimacy she had left disintegrated right in front of the people. But Henyard didn't retreat. She escalated. Even as national headlines piled up and legal entanglements deepened, she stayed defiant. Investigations multiplied. Financial misconduct claims snowballed. Then came the judicial clampdown, a restraining order demanding that she secure board approval before making significant decisions. But compliance was never her style. She pushed back. She resisted. What began as a legal fight had now become a full-blown existential war over power and control. Could she claw her way back? Could she regain the trust of a town that had clearly outgrown her narrative? Day by day, that answer seemed less likely. What once looked like a groundbreaking administration now appeared to be a case study in reckless ambition. Henyard had become a warning, a symbol of how quickly promise can turn to peril when accountability disappears. Dalton's future, once bright with potential, now felt suspended in limbo, and the questions kept growing louder. Was there any way to rebuild trust? Could a new mayor restore stability? Or had the damage cut too deep? The town stood on the edge of something far more dangerous than dysfunction. It was staring down the possibility of irreparable collapse. Because for all the chaos Henyard had brought, one thing was clear. The storm hadn't passed. For Dalton, the worst might still be yet to come.